Hare Krishna. Welcome to class 9 of the Nectar of Devotion. Continuing in our study, we're on chapters 14 and 15. So we'll start with some kirtan.
Yeah. Musicians audio. Okay. Welcome. Thank you for the beautiful flowers, Seva, flower garland, Seva. And we have a great showing tonight on Lion Tail. Let's just take a collective deep breath to just wash away whatever was happening right before this, to invite our attention, our intention to hearing and chanting. Deep breath in, fill up. Exhale, clear it out. Deep breath in, opening prayers. Vaishnava Tuesday night's Shastra class with Shamya Praski. Hari Hari Bol.
Om Gyanantimirantasya Gyananjana Shilakaya Chakshuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vachakalpatarupyascha Kripasantubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Nice turnout tonight. All right. So last week we looked at chapters 12 and 13 and had some nice comments. Let's get some reflections to start us off. Things that stood out from the class or recording or your thoughts on kind of the reflection exercise we were thinking and discussing around Sujatiya and Snigdha, the like-minded and affectionately inclined association. So anything around any of that stood out?
I mean, it's a game changer in devotional life. In
What
spiritual
is?
life, having like-minded, affectionate communication or association and communication, but to be able to be seen and understood and feel like there's shared trust and safety to be able to not only talk about bhakti and Krishna consciousness, but to engage in the 6 loving exchanges that were given to us through the Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Instruction, and to share food, and which we'll be doing on Thanksgiving, and we do our Sangha gatherings, and it's not like out of obligation. It's like you genuinely just want to be with these amazing devotees who get you and see you and push you and inspire you and uplift you and hold you and all of these things. And I think without that, like you said, Shamia, that someone reflected it in their reflect in the WhatsApp, but like that your spiritual advancement comes through serving devotees, that's not only through serving Krishna, right? Something like that. And yeah, we would be nowhere without each other.
Yeah, devotees help each other to remember Krishna and to keep Krishna in the middle. Even that exchange of food, which really everyone is doing everywhere.
Mhm.
It's like the biggest industry is the food industry in any country practically. It's like the thing we have to do every day pretty much. But devotees, that's also with Krishna in the middle. It's like it's offered to Krishna first. It's Krishna prasadam. We're trying to gratify his senses and then distribute that.
Right.
And becomes a loving exchange.
And then sharing your heart and mind
Yeah.
and confidence. Like without that, can you really be authentic?
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
So
Srila
how
Prabhupada
about-
said that's why our international society was created, to facilitate these 6 loving exchanges. So it's a very deep thing. Jai, any more reflections?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You go,
Go ahead.
Samantha.
I didn't raise my hand. I'm so rude. Sorry, Allison. Hi, Krishna, everyone. So, just thinking about the prasadam, I was in my stage group last night. Can you guys hear me? And I don't know if anybody knows Sri Rupa. She's one of my the stage group leader with somebody else, but her mother just left her body the day before, and 2 things. It was just so cool. I mean, that she got to be like surrounded by devotees like that day, the next day, sharing with us, and it it's just such a better way to kind of deal with that than any other way I could think of. And she said that her guru told her that she should serve the devotees for 40 days or whatever it is, 30 days or 40 days, post the leaving of the body, and that's a tradition. And I just thought that was really so interesting, because it's like, you think of people feeding you typically when somebody passes, and to kind of reverse it and feed the devotees and have that. And I just thought that was a really cool tradition that I didn't know about.
Thank you.
Repeat a little bit.
She was talking about when a devotee was leaving her body, and she was instructed by her guru to serve the devotees who were serving her as she was leaving her body, and feed them.
Or her mother was leaving her
Well,
body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I was reflecting when I visited Gitanagari, a devotee farm community in Pennsylvania. There was a quote by His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Swami on the wall. There was a community that was really developed and based on Maharaj's disciples. And so there's a lot of his disciples there. And Maharaj left his body now a few years ago, and he left in an exemplary way. But the quote he was saying was something along the lines of, take very good care of the devotees around you, because those are the devotees that are going to be there when you leave your body. Bhakti is a holistic science. You enter the world, you live in the world, you leave the world, and we're doing everything we can about all of that. And we're also equipping people to leave the world with an intact relationship with Krishna. And so leaving the world is a great science too, how to leave in the best consciousness. Because like you were saying, there's a lot of other ways you can leave, but being surrounded by devotees is really the best thing you can have. So there's a way in which that investment in like-minded, affectionately inclined devotees also just provides the best gateway for going to Krishna when we have to exit this particular body. Thank you. Allison, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to add on to the associations and like-minded individuals just beyond this group, and being able to increase association through technology with just now other devotees from this group that are all over the country. And in our Sage group, just having a devotee dial in from Sri Lanka or Atlanta. So not only just being able to associate in our fortunate Vermont group, but now being able to just expand all over the world and the country has just been amazing for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more reflections?
I love it. You said the devotees are the paraphernalia of the Lord.
Yeah,
And
that's
let's talk about that a lot this week.
that's from the Bhagavatam. That's a verse from Lord Shiva. He says that best form of worship is to worship the Lord's Tadiya. And that's actually not from the Bhagavatam. That's from a different Shastra where he says that to his wife, to Gauri, to Parvati, that highest worship is the worship of the Lord, but therefore higher than that is to worship his Tadiya, to worship his devotees. Because those persons who are associated with the Lord, they're considered like his own paraphernalia. And then Prabhupada gives the example of if you want to get close to like a really powerful, rich, famous person, you wouldn't have any inroads. But if you could actually just compliment and feed and show some kindness to their pet dog, they'll automatically be like, oh yeah, you're cool. Yeah, you're with me. But you couldn't just like walk into their home or get like a sit down with them otherwise. So it's actually a extremely practical thing. And very touching for the person. Great. Any last reflections before we get into the week? Okay. So, chapter 14, devotional qualifications. So this chapter has a lot to do with knowledge and renunciation. And In Sanskrit, that's jnana. Jnana is knowledge, and renunciation is vairagya. Jnana and vairagya, knowledge, renunciation. And their position, what their position is, what their purpose is for bhakti is really clearly explained. So actually, in any spiritual path, knowledge and renunciation are important, right? Knowledge means like knowing what to do, and renunciation you can think of as like being able to do it, you know? If you know what's good for you, that's gyan, that's knowledge. And if you can actually like be renounced from the things that aren't good for you, let go of that and be able to make the choice that's good for you, that's vairagya, that's renunciation. But in devotional service, although those two factors can be useful in the beginning, they're actually not considered to be what's called angas. They're not limbs of bhakti themselves. They're not actually direct practices of bhakti. In the impersonal cultivation of knowledge, like the Gyan Yoga Marg, that's a kind of place where you actually have to have very dedicated practice of accumulating knowledge and trying to refine your renunciation. In bhakti, actually, knowledge and renunciation are effects. They're not really causes. They don't cause bhakti. In fact, our acharyas have explained that too many austerities, taking on too much artificial austerity and engaging in too much mental speculation, like to try to cultivate knowledge and renunciation, all that really does is it starts to make your own heart harden. And that's not useful. What that means is that in the practice of bhakti, we're not actually just aiming for, like unlike with the impersonalists, we're not aiming to become unattached to the material world. That's not our goal. It's useful to be unattached to the material world, but that automatically happens by becoming attached to Krishna. So we're not actually trying to become unattached and like very, very carefully and intensely cultivate that and cultivate the knowledge by which you understand the difference between spirit and matter. That's not our path. Our fundamental path is to become attracted to Krishna and to practice bhakti, the actual direct processes of bhakti. And by doing that, knowledge and renunciation come themselves. So for example, in our process of bhakti, we hear and chant, right? Those are the two of the fundamental practices of bhakti. And in the hearing and chanting in bhakti, we're actually gathering knowledge. There's knowledge in that, but it's part of the hearing and chanting, right? Like we're hearing about the Nectar of Devotion, or we hear about the Bhagavad Gita, or we hear about the Ishopanishad, and we're actually just getting together and hearing these bhakti scriptures, or we're even hearing Krishna's names. And a consequence of these hearing activities is that knowledge arises. You actually get knowledge from hearing even just Krishna's names, or to speak of hearing the philosophical presentations of these scriptures. And there's also renunciation that arises, but that's a consequence of hearing and chanting. It's not something that we actually have to endeavor for directly, right? Does that make sense? And all of that knowledge that we get in bhakti and the renunciation is actually favorable. So what that means, Prabhupada talks about in this chapter, there's different kinds of knowledge. There's different kinds of knowledge and there's different kinds of renunciation. So we're talking about looking at like renunciation, there's a few different terms that come up. One of them Srila Prabhupada was fond of was Markata renunciation. Markata means like a monkey. Renunciation like a monkey. Fake renunciation. A show of renunciation. Just like, somebody can be like, well, I just live au naturel. I don't wear clothes. I don't do the whole modern society thing. I just like live and die really simple. They'll just walk around naked. They're like these old school renunciates in certain traditions. And Prabhupada's counterpoint is, yeah, but monkeys are naked. Are they great renunciates? It's like, it's just Markata renunciation means like putting on a show as if you actually have some renunciation, but you're not. Monkeys just eat, and monkeys just mate. Monkeys just like get up to monkey business. That's why they call it that. If you go to Vrindavan, the monkeys there are very wild and aggressive, and they will tear down things literally for fun, just because they're reckless, like uncontrolled. Anyway, you got to see it to believe them. But that's monkeys, and they're not renounced at all, even though they walk around apparently like you could say, oh yeah, but they're very au naturel. They don't even wear clothes. So somebody in the human form of life can put on a show. They can put on a show of renunciation. That's just monkey renunciation. It can kind of pass like a very cursory examination, but if you look closer, not really any renunciation at all. So then a little deeper, yeah.
Will you just speak to how the meaning of renunciation and how it goes beyond like it's more subtle than simply like leaving
Yeah, I will.
material responsibilities?
But I'm going to do it by getting through these different categories. So, usually when people think of renunciation, they think of like letting go of things, right?
Mhm.
Being renounced means like being at arm's length from. So there's a false renunciation, which is not even renunciation. Then you have what's called palgu vairagya, which is like shallow renunciation. This means to reject something blindly, to basically to be like interested in just rejecting it and just being renounced, apparently letting go of things. But the devotees criticize it. Rupa Goswami criticizes it in the Nectar of Devotion. The Sanskrit verse is forget the first line. Second line is Hari Sambandhi Vastunaham Moksha Parityago Vairagam Palgu Katyate. Hari Sambandhi, if you become renounced from, if you let go of that which could be used in Krishna's service, it's shallow renunciation. So to let go of something you could use, instead of using it in Krishna's service, to let go of it. So Srila Prabhupada talked about this. He said, sometimes these yogis and sannyasis, they're all like very, oh yeah, money is bad, it's the root of all evil. And we don't say that, he said. We will accept whatever money you want to give us. We will use it in building temples. We will use it in distributing Srila Prabhupada and distributing bhakti literature. We will use it in creating giant systems of offering food to Krishna and distributing it widely. We have any amount of money you want to give us, we will accept. But we won't keep a penny for ourselves. None of it is for us, it's all for Krishna. So this is the difference between shallow renunciation, palgu vairagya, and yukta vairagya. Yukta vairagya is the renunciation the devotees practice. Yukta means connected. It's the same root as yoga. Yukta vairagya means to use whatever you can use in Krishna's service for his service without attachment for yourself. Anasaktasya vishayan yatharham upayunjataha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya muchate is the verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Anasaktasya, without being attached for yourself, without having any attachment for your own sake, but accepting as much as is appropriate for the sake of using in Krishna's service. Nirbandha Krishna sambandhe. Krishna sambandhi means in relationship to Krishna, yukta vairagya. So for example, palgu vairagya, false renunciation would be like, oh, you can't use a computer in Krishna's service. This is just these modern amenities. This is all nonsense. When Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master was traveling, he used a car, even though he was a sannyasi. This was considered wild and unprecedented. And when Srila Prabhupada himself went to the West, he had to take a ship across the Atlantic Ocean. And that was actually completely unprecedented for a sannyasi to do that. And the perspective has always been, we are prepared to accept anything that we can use in Krishna's service because we're deeply interested in refining our own ability to use it without being attached to it, right? Srila Bhakti Siddhanta was so serious about spreading Krishna consciousness that in his era, the early 20th century, he was talking to his disciples about arranging like food events and arranging opportunities for the British to come. This is under the British Raj. India was ruled by the British, to come. And the devotees were saying, Maharaj, the British won't eat anything unless there's meat. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, so let there be meat. We'll serve meat. If that's what we have to do to get them to hear about Krishna, we're prepared to do that, right? And that was shocking to some people. But he was willing to see, okay, if that's actually what it takes to get people to hear about Krishna in this time and place, I will take that on. And using cars and doing whatever, using technology, we're using all these things in Krishna's service. The key is to not be attached to having it for your own self, right? So that's where the qualification comes in. It's like Krishna can provide unlimited facility. Like you can use any of these modern amenities for practically unlimited things. There's more computing power, analytical power in anybody's entry-level smartphone now than the greatest computers of the 1980s. It's just unbelievable power. And you can use it for anything. You can use it for literally anything you want. You can get on social media and use it for anything you want, including Krishna's service. But you have to be very careful because those things were created to get people on different algorithms and expose them to, different commercials and make them part of a system that can make money for someone else and get them to waste their own time in different things and self-report about whatever their new hairstyle is or whatever. So if you're not doing that and you're just using it for Krishna's service, it's actually not matter anymore. It's actually spirit. It's actually another tool for using Krishna's service. And to the extent that it's actually used purely, to that extent, it's yukta vairagya. It's renunciation of the tendency to use it for your own sense gratification. That's real renunciation. Real renunciation is not to get rid of the thing. It's to be giving up the inclination, the tendency to use the thing as if it was meant for me, right? Whether that thing is your own body, bodies of others, your money, your health, your time, your technology, your words, anything. The point is being very, very purposeful. So you have yukta vairagya, you have connected renunciation, using something and seeing it as paraphernalia for serving Krishna's senses. And you have palgu vairagya, you have shallow renunciation. This is what the impersonalists do. It's like, oh, can't look at that, can't use it. They're afraid of the material paraphernalia. They're afraid of the material body. They're afraid of money. They're afraid of everything. They don't know how to use it. Well, the one example we can understand in this way, this is something we talked about in the Bhagavad Gita class too. If you're in a grocery store, you see $100 bill float down from somebody, line in front of you, and hits the ground. You can do three things. There's three things you can do. Number one, you can yoink, yoink, put it right in your pocket. It's like, all right, I'm going to spend this on some whatever for yourself. And the second thing you do is like, not my problem. I don't deal with that. I don't look at it. I don't want to get involved. I'm not the kind of person who's going to, use someone else's thing for my thing. Therefore, I don't even, I live with blinders on. I have my very purposeful life and that's not mine. So that's all I know. All I know is it's not mine. Ignore it. And the last one is you tap them on the shoulder and say, excuse me, did you drop this? Yeah, you did. I saw you drop it. This is actually yours. And that's what the devotees do. The devotees, they get that bhakti knowledge and they recognize, actually, yeah, this world is full of things that are problematic if I take them for myself. I can't digest all those things. I'm actually not capable of it. I've been trying for so long to be the central enjoyer and controller. And you know what? Just like the impersonalists recognize, I recognize that's not working. The difference is, I recognize it actually belongs to Krishna. It's actually his $100 bill. It's actually his food. It's actually, all this beauty is his beauty. All these wonderful experiences we can have with food or whatever, I just want to offer to him. I want him to enjoy. He's the central focus. I want to give that to him to whatever degree I can. And to the degree I can, to that degree, I'll engage with the sense objects of the world and attach them to Krishna, connect them to Krishna. And that's my yogic bhakti offering, right? So there's the path of the selfish enjoyer, the path of the dry renouncer, and the path of dedication, the path of bhakti, the path of connection, yukta, connection. So that's what this 14th chapter is about. It's about renunciation and knowledge, and how we don't actually need to cultivate that separately, because that's something that the impersonalists do. They do have to do that. They have to become very, very renounced and very knowledgeable. In fact, in the impersonal path, it doesn't really start until you take sannyas, meaning complete celibacy and solitude, and like only associating with other people who are studying Vedanta and living a very austere life. That's the kind of qualification you have to have, because they have to actually continually fortify their knowledge and renunciation, because that's all they have. They don't have a bhakti process that supplies them knowledge and renunciation secondarily like we do. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So Rupa Goswami goes out of his way, Srila Prabhupada goes out of his way to make this clear for us, so we don't artificially put the cart before the horse. We don't think that by cultivating knowledge or renunciation will create bhakti. It's the other way around. By real practice of bhakti, with Krishna's help, you get knowledge and renunciation. You gradually understand what's good for you. What is spirit? What is matter? How to identify the difference? And how to actually make the right choice, how to actually be renounced from that which isn't good for me. To let go of the tendency to use Krishna's paraphernalia, his energies, for my own self, selfishly. And so the devotees ultimately focus on their direct angas, their direct practices of bhakti. Prabhupada quotes several verses about this. There's a couple from the Bhagavatam, Canto 11. Krishna says, "My dear Uddhava, for persons who are seriously engaged in my service, cultivation of philosophical speculation and artificial renunciation are not very favorable. When a person becomes my devotee, he automatically attains the fruits of the renunciation of material enjoyment, and he gets sufficient knowledge to understand the absolute truth." These devotees have everything at their disposal, but they desire nothing outside my devotional service. Any comments, questions, or reflections on any of that? The nature of knowledge and renunciation.
I really like how you put it, you're using the word artificial. Because I can see how it can definitely feel that way too, especially with like the structure and the guidelines and kind of like knowing the trajectory, but wanting to kind of be somewhere that maybe you're not quite there. It was reminding me of something you had, a way in which you had described to us in one of the past classes about when you go to a kirtan, you don't want to be the person that just like kind of happens to arrive in the kirtan versus like choosing to be there and put yourself right in front of it because you know like what's there. And it just really felt like that mood of like the sweetness that comes from the practice, but not from yeah, like thinking like renouncing is the beginning. Like we can't start our practice trying to be renounced. And that's something that, you know, I at least for me, it feels like important to kind of have like the end, the ultimate end in mind, but while also having to be really rooted in like, where am I truly right now?
Yeah, thank you. And it's important to know like what kind of steps exist between our starting point and yeah, pure devotional service. The Prabhupada talks about, for example, he says eating is necessary, and one wants some palatable dishes to satisfy their sense of taste. So in that case, for the satisfaction of Krishna rather than for the satisfaction of the tongue, some palatable dishes may be offered and prepared for Krishna. That is renunciation. Let the palatable dishes be prepared, but unless they are offered to Krishna, one should not accept them for eating. This vow of rejecting anything that is not offered to Krishna is actually renunciation. So we have a reputation in this movement for incredibly delicious food. I've never met anybody who's been dissatisfied with the culinary experience of the Hare Krishnas. I don't care what they eat. at any other time in their life. Whenever they meet us, they're very satisfied. For example, we just came back from Govardhan Hill, and I brought back some sweets from Govardhan, and everyone who comes here or everywhere we go, everyone we see, we're giving those sweets to. And your dad was like really appreciating.
Those Indian cookies.
Yeah, they're not even really cookies.
No.
They're like just very unique sweets that you can get them anywhere in India, but they're only made a certain way in one place at Govardhan Hill. And they're always made by devotees and offered to Govardhan. And that's what we brought back. And so it's actually not that hard to have really good food through the prasad experience, the spiritualization of food. And it's like one may have so many other things they're attached to, but if you can start to chant Hare Krishna and you can start to offer food to Krishna and eat that, that's super practical place to start. And the more you can do those two things, this is called the yoga of the tongue. Krishna reveals himself through this yoga of the tongue. The more you chant Hare Krishna, the more you eat food that's been offered to Krishna. And that's a really practical way of like measuring how you're doing. It's like, yeah, I'm not, Rupa Goswami or Srila Prabhupada. And at the same time, okay, I'm working on my yoga of the tongue. And that's what I can do. And eventually you get to a place where the only things you eat are that which is offered to Krishna. And you arrange your life in such a way that you only eat food that is offerable and you offer it first. And you're chanting as much as you can. And the results are palpable. We'll say the results are really palpable. Thank you. Any more questions or comments on this knowledge and renunciation? Online crew's doing good? Great. Okay. Little nuts.
Mary has something to say? Or she's just zooming in?
No, she's good. I'm just adjusting the camera.
Okay.
Srila Prabhupada continues, one should not give up anything that can be utilized in the service of the Lord. That is a secret of devotional service. Anything that can be utilized in advancing Krishna consciousness and devotional service should be accepted. Sometimes people ask us, why are you utilizing material products if you condemn the advancement of material civilization? But actually, we do not condemn. We simply ask people to do whatever they are doing in Krishna consciousness. With such sentiment for Krishna or Krishna consciousness, we can accept everything. If the typewriter can be utilized for advancing our Krishna consciousness movement, we must accept it. This was written in the 70s. Typewriter.
The typewriter.
The typewriter. Similar to the dictating machine or any other machine must be used. Our vision is that Krishna is everything. Krishna is the cause and effect, and nothing belongs to us. Krishna's things must be used in the service of Krishna. That is our vision. So then the work we have to do is to make sure that we're not using it for our own sense gratification. So just trying, like, there's a gradual process of using it for Krishna more and more. Like maybe somebody's attached to playing the guitar, and so you try to use it in kirtan. That's what I did. I came to Bhakti and I was really into playing the guitar, and I just brought my guitar with me to all the different kirtans. And the devotees just, yeah, come on in, use the guitar in kirtan. And I tried to contribute to the kirtan experience while still chanting on the guitar. And what I found was eventually I wasn't attached to the guitar anymore. I was attached to kirtan. And it was better. Yeah. Okay. Continuing the chapter. Prabhupada continues, Rupa Goswami affirms herein there are 9 different kinds of devotional service, listed as hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshiping the deity in the temple, praying, carrying out orders, serving Krishna as a friend, and sacrificing everything for him. Each and every one of these processes is so powerful that if anyone follows even a single one of them, they can achieve the desired perfection without fail. For example, if one is attached simply to hearing about the Lord, and another is attached to chanting the glories of the name, both will achieve their desired goal in devotional service. in this section, Srila Prabhupada talks about how historically there have been devotees who have really perfected one process, right? Maharaj Parikshit in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he hears the Bhagavatam. He's the original hearer of Bhagavatam because he was cursed to die. And when he was cursed to die, he accepted it. He could have actually counteracted the curse, but he thought, no, this is actually Krishna's arrangement. I'm supposed to die in 7 days. That's what the curse is. So let me sit down here on the banks of the Ganga and let me find somebody who knows more than me. Let me wait for a spiritual master to appear. And let me ask them all my questions and hear what's really important for me to understand at this time of death. So Shukadeva Goswami came, and for 7 days he spoke to Maharaj Parikshit. And Shukadeva Goswami became perfect by reciting the Bhagavatam. Maharaj Parikshit became perfect by hearing the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada is quoting a verse here. He's talking about how Prahlad Maharaj became successful by always remembering the Lord. Lakshmi Devi is always engaging in massaging the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. That is her perfection. Maharaj Prithu was engaged in deity worship. Akrura became perfect through perfect prayers. Hanuman, through service, his service attitude is unparalleled. Arjuna became perfect by his friendship for Krishna. And Bali Maharaj, who we hear about in the Canto 8, his complete self-surrender perfected him. These are all different angas, limbs of bhakti. And each one of those devotees really focused in on one and became super expert at them. And our bhakti lifestyle really includes multiple. We learn how to be attached to the deities. We're hearing, we're chanting, we develop remembrance. As we develop a sense of friendship and servitude also increase and other things like that. So we're getting a multi-pronged approach. But even one, if you can just really get in, focused in on one, you can become perfect in your bhakti path. Moving on to chapter 15. Spontaneous devotional service. You know what? I changed my mind. I could use some water. Sure. Thank you. If it's not already hot, just whatever. Whatever, you don't have to spend a bunch of time down there. How's everyone doing? Any comments or questions so far before we go into chapter 15?
There's something that
Yeah.
I think I came across it in the Bhagavad Gita. I think I want to say it's also chapter 15.
Okay.
I was trying to find the verse, I can't find it, but Prabhupada, he says specifically in the translation, when we can understand what's mine and not mine. And I had written that down a couple places, and I think for me, initially, I think from like a healing lens, like what is actually mine versus not mine, what am I taking on that is for me versus not for me, but having you speak about this, what is mine, I can now see it in the broader sense of like nothing is really mine, but what can I use that I am given? But I guess was hoping if you could speak a little bit to that, when we can understand what's mine versus not mine.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, verse 5. And in that verse, Krishna is talking to Arjuna. He says, those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. And in that purport, Prabhupada breaks all those things down. False prestige is the idea that you're the owner and controller. And Prabhupada says, pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, then goes away, they have the foolish notion that they are the Lord of the world. They thus make all things complicated and they are always in trouble. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are proprietors. So that's illusion. It's one of the things to give up, according to Krishna here. And so, yeah, in the bhakti literature, there's a lot of this kind of knowledge that comes, that actually, not only is it not my planet, my country, it's Krishna's. That's actually who it belongs to. So dispelling the illusion entirely, because otherwise, yeah, we have a false sense of belonging. One has to get out, Prabhupada says, one has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world, right? The way the devotees do that is by acknowledging who actually is the proprietor. The imperfect or impersonalist way of doing that is to say, well, I'm not the proprietor, and that's all I know. So I'm not going to deal with the world as if I'm the proprietor. And that's only partly true. The complete truth is I'm not the proprietor because Krishna is. It actually comes from him. It's actually his energy. This material world, we understand scientifically, according to Bhagavad Gita, how the animate and inanimate are both energetic expansions of Krishna, and he is the owner and controller of both. So dealing with it properly actually helps us to let go of this idea, because otherwise, without that bhakti knowledge, everyone is operating under the inertia just of this idea that it belongs to us. We just carry that from birth because we're already conditioned. We have our own trajectory. We come into this life, and in one way or another, we're thinking that we're the owner and controller. And so this actual conception, this bhakti conception, removes that illusion from us. Prabhupada continues, when one is freed from such a false notion of proprietorship, they become free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually their own and what is actually not their own. These are items of knowledge that support surrender to Krishna. And yeah, the hearing, the very fact that you heard this in Bhagavad Gita is evidence that these are products of our hearing process. These are the kinds of things that come up in the Bhakti scriptures regularly. Thank you. Does that help?
Yeah, you're connecting a lot of dots.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good verse. Good verse in purport, 15.5 Bhagavad Gita. Anything else coming up for anyone?
Right, the Krishna mug.
Hmm?
Right,
The Krishna mug.
mug.
That's how you use mugs in Krishna service. It's hot water.
I was just thinking,
Please.
one sec. I don't know who, I didn't see who was just talking, but I was just thinking about the proprietorship. About the word. Like, I feel like a really good place to witness this firsthand is teaching at a high school, because I feel like watching these kids, they are so self-absorbed. Like, and not in a, obnoxious way, but just that they think that everything is rotating around them, like the way people will be reading their text messages out loud and to believe what she said or didn't. It's very me. And it's interesting to have the perspective of, time and age and bhakti, and see that, these kids are learning, but they don't have this foundation of really understanding yet or ever that, these are situational occurrences that are happening, and really is not them per se. And I was just thinking too today, as I was looking into something like this unfold, it's too bad in our culture. I mean, people get stuff everywhere, I guess, but that there's no bhakti in my school. But that there's not a lot of talking about this kind of thing. And it just seems now that more than ever with the smartphones and the personal social media pages, everything seems so self-centered. It just would be nice to have some exposure to this kind of thinking at a younger age.
Well, the fact that you're inspired about that is an opportunity. So maybe you can meditate on it and see what comes up for you. Like Krishna inspires you, how we can do that. I remember when I was a monk in Denver, regularly we had a relationship with the local high schools for years, decades. They had these little outings that they would come, and the teachers, they knew our temple president, they would arrange, they would come, they would bring their high school students, 20 of them or whatever, and they would come to the temple room and get a little rundown. And everybody who came in would have a kirtan experience. We would serve them prasadam. They saw the deities. They would meet an advanced devotee, usually Tushta Krishna Prabhu, our temple president, and he would talk about these fundamental things. This is what we do. This is what Bhakti Yoga is. This is what Bhagavad Gita explains. We're living in a world where everybody thinks that they're the center, and so has anybody here noticed that creates any problems? Everyone's hands go up. And in the course of a few minutes, they have all these experiences, including just a little tidbit of philosophy that, yeah, actually putting ourselves out of the center and putting the common center there, however we understand that, calling Krishna, higher power, that actually is much more logical and feels great. And they can feel that big by getting that prasadam and kirtan and Krishna Katha, a little bit of deity exposure. And I would go on books and sometimes meet people, 20 years after they'd had that. And they'd be like, yeah, I know you guys. I came to see you guys when I was 16 years old in high school. They would come for half an hour. That's it, just half an hour, maybe never come back, but they never forgot because it's so different than everything else they're getting. It's just categorically different. And they'd be like, yeah, I like what you guys, I remember you guys. That was nice. That was a nice day. They wouldn't necessarily remember everything that was said to them, but they remember how they felt. And it stuck with them. I had that experience several times. I met people who went to University of Florida in Gainesville like 30, 40 years ago. And there's been a Krishna lunch program, prasadam distribution there since 1972 or something. Unbroken. Still going on. And many times I would meet these people and be like, yeah, I would eat there. And I loved, and I would get some little philosophy, or I have a book that I got in 1983 from you guys.
Mhm.
So any little bit you can offer to people, and the younger they are when you do it, is powerful, and it will stick around in their consciousness. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Jai. All right, chapter 15 of Back to Nectar Devotion, chapter 15 from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, spontaneous devotional service. So in this chapter, Srila Prabhupada defines for us these terms ragatmika and raganuga. Ragatmika means a devotee that is constitutionally, naturally, they have spontaneous love for Krishna. And raganuga, anuga means following. Raganuga means devotional service that is following under the inspiration of those who are naturally already perfect in devotional service. The Ragatmika devotees are devotees like the gopis of Vrindavan, Krishna's friends, Krishna's parents, Arjuna. So many devotees like that are on the professional level. They're Ragatmika. Raganuga means, as we heard earlier in the Nectar Devotion, there's Vaidhi Bhakti. There's devotional service performed on the strength of regulative scriptural injunctions, regulative principle, rules. And there's Raganuga Bhakti. Raganuga Bhakti is devotion on the strength of spontaneous attraction. In this chapter, Srila Prabhupada talks about that, Raganuga Bhakti. And in this and the next chapter, he talks about two subdivisions of that, which in Sanskrit are called Kamarupa and Sambandharupa, which means he translates roughly as sensual attraction and relationship. Basically, Kamarupa, what he calls sensual attraction, which is discussed towards the end of this chapter, has to do with specifically the feeling that the gopis have for Krishna in Vrindavan. And That means what's called the Madhurya Rasa. Rasa means there's different fundamental ways we can relate to the Supreme Lord in bhakti. One of them is Madhurya. Like we can see Krishna as and serve him as the Supreme Master, right? The Supreme Friend, Supreme Child in a parental relationship, and also the Supreme Lover. And the conjugal rasa, this rasa of the lover. This is what's defined as kamarupa in Sanskrit, or sensual attraction. Now, to make it very clear, Prabhupada defines here that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami, he defines for us what is like lust, what is like selfish material desire, and what is prema, what is actual love of Krishna. And the difference is, the actual verse is Atmendri Priti Vancha Tari Balikama, Krishnendri Priti Icha Dhari Premanama, which means the desire to gratify your own senses. That's kama. That's selfish desire. That's material desire. The desire to completely pure desire to satisfy Krishna's senses. That's prema. So, in the material paradigm, in the material world, under material consciousness, any division of relationship has some selfishness to it, right? And that's the main thing. However, the relationship of the pure devotees with Krishna is that they have no inclination to even worry about their own gratification. Now, this is only possible when we're relating to Krishna. This is only possible when we're related to Krishna, because otherwise, if we're not talking about a relationship with Krishna, we always have to worry what's in it for me. Krishna is actually completely potent, completely sufficient to satisfy us in every way. And automatically by serving him, we become completely fulfilled. That's not true of any material relationship. That's not actually possible to have in a relationship outside of a relationship with the source. So the devotees actually don't ever have to be in anxiety. Everyone else always has some anxiety. The materialist has some anxiety. They're always thinking, what's in it for me? The impersonalist has some anxiety because they're always trying to avoid Maya, avoid the senses and the energy of the world. They're just trying to stay as focused as they can on, okay, spirit is real, matter is fake, that whole thing, you know? And even the yogis, they have some selfish desire to enjoy the subtle yogic perfections you can get through that path. But the devotee, they have no concern at all. They're actually free from such anxieties because all they have to do is what the heart really wants to do anyway. They just serve Krishna, and they're completely free. And this is called prema. And so this term that's used, kama rupa, the love that the gopis have for Krishna is compared to conjugal love of this world, but it's not actually the same. The reason it's compared is because it gives us some reference point, because we don't have anything else to compare it to. It appears to be, Prabhupada uses the word lusty, like very passionate, right? Prabhupada writes, the gopis, however, wanted nothing at all but to gratify the senses of the Lord, and there is no instance of this in the material world. Therefore, the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholars as being like the quote-unquote lusty desire of the material world, but actually this should not be taken as literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. And Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami give some logic. For example, Lord Chaitanya, who we understand is an incarnation of Krishna, but even outside of that, we can see in Lord Chaitanya's Leela, at one point, after growing up in Navadvip, he became very interested in bhakti, and he decided to take sannyas to serve his development in bhakti and to share bhakti with others. Now, as a sannyasi, although Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful incarnation, we can see that as a sannyasi, he was very, very strict with himself, extremely strict. Devotees understand that he was very strict with himself and others who were in the renounced order, because he wanted his followers to be very careful that if you're going to be a monk, if you're going to be like a sannyasi, a fully renounced person, do it all the way. Do not do it halfway, because that's been a real problem in every tradition. People who claim to be renounced and they're having like affairs and stuff on the side, they're not actually, be in or out, be in the world, have one partner and do that. Or if you're going to be a monk, don't play around with that energy. So Lord Chaitanya did not play around with that energy. He was very, very, of course, he's Krishna, but he was very, very strict. And yet what we find is, although he was very strict, he held the love that the gopis had for Krishna in the very highest esteem. Well, why would he do that if it were just some mundane girl boy stuff? Because it's not. It's not some mundane stuff of the material world. It's not the stuff of the Harlequin romances or any other manifestation of romance. It's not actually a product of this world. It just looks like that to the untrained eye. But he considered it the highest, most pure, most unadulterated, selfless love for Krishna. Other great devotees like Uddhava considered that, although Uddhava was a disciple of Brihaspati, the teacher, the Brahmin teacher of all the demigods, is a very brilliant devotee. And he was one of Krishna's very dear friends in Dvarka. When he found out that he had the association of the devotees in Vrindavan, he went there on Krishna's order. He went there. He thought he was going there to instruct them. Actually, he got there and he realized, oh my goodness, they're here to teach me. He learned about how the gopis and other residents of Vrindavan were so spontaneously attracted to Krishna that although he had left, they could not stop thinking about him. They had such an intense and unbroken meditation on Krishna for no other purpose than to serve him, that it put all the other yogis and devotees he ever knew to shame. And he actually prayed in that section, better I take birth as a plant in this place of Vrindavan, because if I take birth as like a blade of grass here, these boys and girls who have developed this intense love for Krishna, when they walk on me, they will put the dust of their feet on my head and I will receive their mercy because they really know how to serve Krishna. I thought I did, but I actually realized they know. So Uddhava thought this way too about the gopis. So similarly, we can see that the logic is there that this is not material. So in this section, we're hearing about the specific qualification of the gopis. Prabhupada writes, unfortunately, persons who cannot understand the transcendental nature of the love affairs of the gopis and Krishna take it for granted that Krishna's love affairs with the gopis are mundane transactions, and therefore they sometimes indulge in painting licentious pictures in some modernistic style. On the other hand, then he goes on to describe in more detail. The chapter ends before we get into Sambandha Rupa, which is described in chapter 16 as relationship that has to do with the service of the friends and parents of Krishna, other varieties of spontaneous love. But chapter 15 has a lot to do with this pure spontaneous love. And the Raganuga Bhakti, the form of bhakti of those who have cultivated a pure desire to follow in the footsteps of those who actually have great spontaneous and pure attraction for Krishna. So now we'll take any reflections on anything you heard. Anything that stood out, any comments, any questions, and I will come up with our homework for the week. Let's get some reflections. I saw you all right now.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So in today's world where we are right now, give me an example of a ragda mukta. Wait, I'm saying it wrong. My right glasses on. The first one, spontaneous love. So in the book here, it talks about residents of Vrindavan that are just were around Krishna and loved him. Like, how does that relate to like now? Like, Because like,
relates-
for instance, I only know devotees, so I would, I follow in the footsteps of devotees to become closer to Krishna and love. So I guess I don't understand necessarily specifically how spontaneous devotional service differs from that in today's language. Does that make sense?
Right.
My question?
Yeah, well, devotional service is performed under the guidance of devotees in our Sangha, living devotees, their association. There's a point at which, as our practice of Vaidhi Bhakti develops, our practice of Bhakti under the rules and regulations, guided and under the force of the shoulds, the do's and don'ts, given through scripture and supported by the guidance of devotees, as that develops and thickens, we develop our own natural spontaneous attraction to Krishna.
Okay.
And over the course of the Nectar of Devotion, there's the descriptions of when, how to begin to take shelter of the eternal associates of Krishna. And one naturally finds themselves, for example, it's described by hearing very seriously scripture for a long time, one starts to find they have a special natural inclination for a certain mood of service to Krishna. That comes about by hearing all the bhakti scriptures, and then under guidance, one then will come to a point of recognizing I'm particularly attracted to this mode, right, of serving Krishna. Like, for example, how Mother Yashoda serves Krishna. One will then feel a great desire, a spiritual desire, not like oh, this seems interesting, like a material desire, but actually it'll come from within. At an appropriate time, one starts to feel like I would love to serve Krishna in this way. Becomes very attached to hearing those particular pastimes of baby Krishna, Krishna as a child, for example. And so the hearing process becomes then a little bit more refined. That's how it relates to us here. Ragatmika devotees are those who are eternal associates of Krishna, are perfect in particular ways. The Raganuga devotee is a devotee who has reached a mature point of following in the footsteps of such a devotee. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
It's a
Thank
high
you.
thing. And it's we're talking about it because it's part of what Lord Chaitanya gave us to give. It's really the goal. We're aiming at spontaneous love.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So then would it be like, you could almost start out as the Raganuga and then become the first one? Like if you
When
would it be?
the idea is that, as far as I recall, the term Ragatmika
Mhm.
is only used for, has only ever been used for devotees who are perfect in the prema. They're actually they're existing in a spiritual body.
Mhm.
So that would be a variety of devotees in scripture. And technically, that term wouldn't be used until you leave this human body, I think. But yes, that is the goal, to go back home, back to Godhead, and to serve Krishna in a spiritual body.
Right, because there's examples of devotees and acharyas who like were a gopi in the spiritual world and they took a body in this life, right?
For the purpose of service, yeah.
For the purpose of service, and therefore they're practicing that higher level of that spontaneous bhakti devotional service.
Yeah.
Because they actually were.
They
Whether
actually
this
they
is-
actually already are. Yeah,
Yeah.
like for example, I mean, Rupa Goswami is himself an eternal associate of Radha and Krishna. He's a Manjari, he's a gopi in the spiritual world. In Lord Chaitanya's Leela, certain members of the eternal associates of Radha and Krishna appear. They appear for service reasons. They don't like randomly trip and fall and end up in this world. They have specific, just like Krishna comes as Lord Chaitanya, Balaram comes as Nityananda. You have certain devotees come with a very specific service profile. So these Goswamis of Vrindavan, they're actually eternal associates. They come with a service profile of compiling Shastra, unearthing the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, developing deity worship in Vrindavan, sharing the science. That's what Rupa Goswami is doing. And they themselves exemplify Raganuga Bhakti, They exemplify spontaneous love for Krishna in action. The lives of the Goswamis of Vrindavan is very instructive in this regard, how they lived. And our acharyas have studied very carefully from them and underneath them in generations from that time of the 6 Goswamis right after Lord Chaitanya to explain what that means for us. So the writings of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they're embedded with this because this is our goal. Our goal is spontaneous love for Krishna. That is specifically what Lord Chaitanya came to give us. And the Goswamis exemplify that for us. And they also teach us how to do it with books like Nectar of Devotion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
More-
love how you talked about how chanting and eating prasad is the yoga of the tongue.
Yoga of the tongue.
And that I also find it so, I don't know, the word is refreshing, encouraging. Less pressure being put on oneself or myself or a devotee, knowing that you can perfect, like if you really hone in on one of the 9 processes, like, and if you don't, like, for me, I felt like when I first started practicing bhakti, I didn't have it was more of like, I didn't have a natural desire, like drawing attraction to deities. I thought they were beautiful, but I didn't feel the presence of God in them. Right, and it was like, okay, well, like everyone loves the deities, so I'm gonna try. Right, and sort of the monkey renunciation in that way, right? It's like, but I love it. I love the idea of dressing them up and like these types of things. And I even said the words, I love, but I'm not gonna get into deity worship. I'm not gonna have deities in my home, that's for sure, right? And look at us now.
That'd be crazy.
That would be crazy. What would people think? You know? However, here we are.
It
and
developed.
it developed.
Yeah.
Right, and so through that yoga of the tongue.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. Did you have more?
I think I'm basically complete, and that you don't have to, in order to practice bhakti and quote unquote be a good devotee, practice all of the 9 processes of devotional service.
Yeah.
At the same level.
Focus on hearing and chanting. That is the wellspring from where everything comes from. And when I said yoga of the tongue, that's, I mean, it's kind of like a nice little turn of phrase, but it's basically from Shastra. Atashi Krishna nama adina bhavet grahyam indriyai sevan mukhe jihva adau svayam eva spuratiraha. Jihva means tongue. Atashi Krishna nama adina bhavet means the name. I think this is from Padma Purana. This is actually, I'll find it for you. It's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 17:136, but it's from, it's from Bhakti Samrita Sindhu. Anyway, it's saying that Krishna's name, his form, all the things about him that can't be experienced by our blunt material senses. However, Sevan Mukhe, with an intention to serve, Jiva Adao, beginning with the tongue. By trying to serve him, beginning with our tongue, Spuratyadaha, he himself manifests. So that means taking prasadam, chanting his names. That's what it means. And that's I mean, think about it, the human tongue is one of the things that really differentiates us from other living beings in this planet. We can speak. We can do some amazing things, our communication. And we can also offer Krishna food and honor that prasadam. We can actually regulate our eating in ways that animals can't. They have it regulated for them. Humans actually have a tremendous amount of freedom in what they can eat. And if you're living in a time, in a place, and a mode of life where you don't have to like scrounge around like in a jungle somewhere to just try to eat, if you actually have what most of us have in the modern world, which is the ability to choose from a variety beyond what even kings had access to a couple hundred years ago, then you're living that human experience where you have freedom. You can do whatever you want with the tongue. You can have it be all about your gratification, or you can use it and just try to eat Krishna's prasadam. And if you do those 2 things, take Krishna's prasad, which means offering it to him first, finding what he wants, foods in the mode of goodness, and then honor that, and you chant Hare Krishna, then Everything comes from that. That's what that verse actually says. I'm just calling it the yoga of the tongue because it's kind of like memorable. It's catchy. Because it is. It's just yoga of the tongue. That's all it is. The tongue is your rudder, like in a ship. Great. More reflections, questions, comments?
Is it, I think the first verse in Nectar of Instruction, that's like the
Mm.
first instruction. It's about the mouth.
It is. Vachu vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jiva vegam, udara pasta vegam. 6 things. The urge of the speaking, mind, anger, the tongue meaning tasting, and the belly and genitals. That's 6. And one who can control and regulate those 6, they can function as a guru. Because the status quo, the default setting is those 6 are the masters. They're the masters of the world. And anyone who can master those things, they're actually etan veganyo vishahita they're dhira, they're sober. Sarvam apimang pritiving sashushят. Everyone can be their student. Such a person can function as a guru. Regulating. And Prabhupada in that purport gives a lot about how to regulate, what it means to regulate those 6 things. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just eating whatever we feel like eating, saying whatever we feel like saying. We're dominated by anger and lust and the mind, the belly. Yeah. Good memory.
All you, sitting up here.
More comments, questions, reflections? Anything you heard? I want one more reflection from the online crowd. What did you hear?
I'll go. It's connecting to me to Dharma. Like I'm sitting here trying to figure out, well, what's my purpose? And it's not so much about what my purpose is. It's about how everything, all points lead to Krishna. Your voice, your eating, your serving, and it's a interesting path to get there. And it's what's connecting for me tonight is maybe Dharma is this spontaneous service, a spontaneous love and connection to Krishna.
Well said.
Wow.
Thank you. That's our Sanatan Dharma. That's our eternal identity. When Rupa Goswami's brother, Sanatan Goswami, met Lord Chaitanya, he said, Kayami. I forget how he puts it. It says in Bengali, who am I and why am I suffering? And in the course of his answers, Lord Chaitanya says, Jivera Swarupa Hoy Krishnera Nitadas. Who you are, your eternal identity, the eternal identity of everybody is an eternal servant of Krishna. Completely apart from the gross and subtle material body. You're a spiritual unit. You're a servant. Krishna and a servant of his servants. And so you have a birthright, actually. You have an eternal right as a spiritual being. That you have the right to spontaneous love, attraction, and service to Krishna. You can have that. That's who you are. So, spot on.
Thank you.
Jai.
Sorry.
And so, it's almost 8 o'clock. So for this week, please share any reflections, comments, questions in the WhatsApp thread. Specifically, what I'm thinking is, I really found that there's a lot of juice, I think, in this whole discussion around the different kinds of renunciation, right? There's monkey renunciation, looking like you renounce, but living like a monkey. There's Palgu Vairagya, false renunciation, where you let go of that which you could use in Krishna's service. And there's Yukta Vairagya, where you use whatever you can use in Krishna's service. And what you give up is not the thing. You give up using it for yourself. You give up the selfish motive. You give up putting yourself in the middle. You put Krishna in the middle. So what I'd like is for everybody to offer some reflection on Yukta Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya is a very rich and very subtle thing. What it means to actually use something in Krishna's service without attachment. So you can talk about, for example, what that looks like for you, what your own relationship with Yukta Vairagya is looking like. Maybe there's some way in which you're using one of Krishna's energies more and more in his service. Or maybe there's some part of the material world that you're attached to for using for yourself, and your desire is to use that in Krishna's service instead of for yourself. So you're thinking of like, I'd like to spiritualize that aspect of my relationship with Krishna's energy. You know, like maybe you're like really attached to beauty or wealth or one of the opulences, and you're like thinking, how can I engage that in Krishna's service instead of what I've been doing for so many lifetimes, trying to keep it for myself. You could even look at it from a societal perspective and look at how in our material society, what's happening when we don't engage things in Krishna's service, and what would happen if we did, right? What would happen if we did? So just muse on Yukta Vairagya, the process, the devotional process of using something in Krishna's service and giving up my own selfish, materialistic tendency to have it be about me. Use it only for Krishna's service. Okay? Jai. All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai. Nectar of Devotion Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai. Burlington Bhakti Sangha and beyond ki jai. Vansha Kalpatarupyashta Pasathu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanepyo Vaishnavepyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. See you all in a week. Great to be with you. Thank you for our online crew listening on YouTube. We love you. Haribol.